The narrative unfolds with the birth of a child whose father harbors deep resentment. This resentment stems from the simultaneous birth of another child, Kaijin, who is hailed as a prodigy blessed by the sword god. Kaijin is gifted with both an exceptional physique and extraordinary talent. Conversely, the child's mother yearns for a son like Kaijin, as her own baby has been born with only one arm. Tragically, the mother persistently voices her desire for the child to perish, yet the infant clings to life, instilled with the belief that he is their only hope, a sentiment that had seemingly been imparted during his time in his mother's womb. The father, driven by the desire for his son to surpass all others, especially Kaijin, who was born with 2 arms and divine blessings, hopes that his child will excel. However, this hope is shattered at the moment of the child's birth, deemed a disgrace by merely existing. As Kaijin demonstrates remarkable progress in his early years, the child struggles to walk, and the mother's disappointment deepens. When he eventually takes his first steps, Kaijin has already begun mastering the blade. As Kaijin delves into swordsmanship, the child remains far behind. At the age of 7, the child is sent to become one of Kaijin's attendants, a move that conceals a dark truth. While externally he appears to be supporting his cousin, in reality, his parents have sold him for a substantial sum of 300,000 luden. His uncle, a once incredible figure, vanished long ago, leaving Kaijin to grow up unchecked, becoming increasingly unruly. Daven, always envious of Kaijin's strength and talent, diligently pursues his dreams. Despite Kaijin's descent into indulgence with women and alcohol as he matures, Daven remains unable to defeat him. However, their roles eventually shift. One fateful day, before an audience, Daven and Kaijin engage in a fiercely contested battle, culminating in Daven's unexpected victory. This astonishing turn of events marks Daven's first victory in 21 matches, and he finally manages to best Kaijin at the age of 28. As Daven departs the arena, Kaijin suddenly thrusts his sword into Daven's chest, taking his life. Daven believes he has finally triumphed over Kaijin, but it becomes apparent that he has little time left to live due to a fatal wound inflicted by the Sun Blade, a legendary weapon imbued with anti-magic properties. In a surprising twist, Daven's demise does not lead to Kaijin being remembered as a loser. Instead, Saint Lila intervenes and rescues Daven from certain death. Although he is alive, Daven's body is shattered, rendering him virtually immobile. A mysterious figure, masked and shrouded in secrecy, informs Daven that his victory over Kaijin was only possible because of a pact with the devil, a revelation corroborated by Daven's own parents. This shocking revelation leaves Daven incredulous. The masked figure further reveals the discovery of evidence, including bottles of blood and sacrifices, linking Kaijin to the diabolical contract. Kaijin, it turns out, had stabbed Daven in a bid to preserve the honor of the Samion family. Astonishingly, Daven discovers that even after his victory against Kaijin, he had chosen Kaijin over himself. Consequently, Daven is sentenced to a lifetime in prison, his mana sealed away, and he is cast into the depths of incarceration. Kaijin later visits Daven in prison, revealing that he has ascended to the status of Sword Emperor, celebrated as a hardworking genius. Credits he attributes to Daven. Following Kaijin's visit, Daven's meager food rations are further reduced, and he ultimately succumbs to hunger and deprivation, his tragic fate sealed within the cold confines of his prison cell. Subsequently, he regained sensation in his right arm and found himself reincarnated as a young boy. Confusion enveloped him as he struggled to comprehend his new reality. Standing before him was an unfamiliar man, whom he tentatively referred to as Vincent, the 7th offspring of the prestigious Adenka family. Unbeknownst to him, these memories did not belong to Vincent. The man made an attempt to seize him using his mana, but Vincent instinctively thwarted the assault, pressing the intruder firmly against the wall. Apologies followed, with the man attributing the incident to a slip of his hand. However, as the man rose to his feet, he warned Vincent that his own son would eventually overpower him. He asserted that it would mark the first time the Brand family would emerge victorious over the Adenka family. Before departing, he instructed Vincent to await the assembly of true swords. Vincent retreated to his chamber, still uncertain if this was merely a dream. Yet fragments of unfamiliar memories began to resurface. He recalled the tragic loss of his mother shortly after his birth and the complete indifference of his father towards him. His siblings, in turn, had treated him as a scapegoat, subjecting him to ridicule and blame. He had been perceived as a coward who often sought refuge in his room after enduring the youngest sister's low, cruel slaps. Abandoned by all, the one-armed Daven had transformed into the seemingly useless Vincent within the Adenka family. Vincent, however, remained oblivious to this reality until he stumbled upon a diary, its pages chronicling the harsh mistreatment he had endured. Closing the book, he contemplated the notion that perhaps his prayers had been answered. In his final moments he had longed for life, whereas this Vin character seemed to have wished for death. He wondered if, in this strange twist, the one who yearned to die had faded, making way for the one who cherished life. Suddenly, a voice from behind pierced the silence, questioning Vincent's readiness to accept such an absurd notion. Startled, he inquired about the identity of the intruder. The voice identified itself as the original owner of the body, Vincent. Vincent was taken aback by this revelation, unable to fathom how the previous occupant of this body had returned from the brink of death. The newcomer, with white hair, introduced himself as Yulion and clarified that he no longer bore a name after relinquishing his body to Vincent. Yulion explained that he was, in fact, a minor god, originally attempting to summon a spirit of gold but inadvertently allowing Daven's spirit to inhabit his body instead. To ascend to full godhood, Yulion needed to accomplish numerous achievements, referred to as callings. Vincent, however, expressed disinterest in Yulion's divine goals, asserting his intention to embrace his newfound life without concerning himself with the ghost's wishes. Yulion countered, revealing that Vincent's spiritual power was alarmingly low and warning that if it were to deplete entirely, Vincent's body would perish. Unconvinced, Vincent dismissed this as a threat, confident in the robust health of his new form. Yet his assurance crumbled as he suddenly collapsed onto the floor. With a smirk, Yulion informed Vincent that he would now unveil his true memories. Channeling these memories into Vincent, he revealed that beneath the facade of a coward, the young boy had been meticulously laying the groundwork for revenge. Vincent struggled to reconcile these thoughts with those of a 13-year-old boy. Overwhelmed, he pondered the nature of the world into which he had been reborn. Yulion, still wearing his enigmatic smile, inquired about the quality of his acting, explaining that he had to evade surveillance within his own family while pursuing knowledge at an apostle level. He proposed that their alliance could be mutually beneficial. Intrigued, Vincent tentatively agreed. Yulion then posed a question that would shake Vincent's newfound reality. "Have you ever heard of the Archdaemon Daven and the hero King Kajin?" Vincent's shock at the revelation left him speechless. 5 centuries ago, in a world obscured by time, a one-armed swordsman named Daven had managed a daring escape from the notorious Samon's prison. His escape, however, was only the beginning of a dark and treacherous journey. Yulion began to weave the tale of Daven's twisted path to power. The one-armed warrior had forged a sinister pact with a demon, a connection that afforded him the terrible ability to consume the souls of countless children to bolster his strength. The sheer malevolence of his actions had led to the deaths of over 1,000 innocent souls, earning him a macabre reputation as an archdaemon throughout the annals of history. Vincent, overwhelmed by the revelation, struggled to come to terms with the horrifying truth. He couldn't comprehend how he had arrived 500 years into the future. He had been certain of his death in that grim prison 5 centuries ago. In his recollection, the Samon family had cast aside the one-armed man, choosing instead to elevate the storm sword, ultimately resulting in Daven's lonely demise behind prison walls. The storm sword had risen to become the illustrious Sword Emperor. The audacity of fabricating history and the portrayal of Daven as an archdaemon and Kajin as a hero king left Vincent seething with disbelief. His anger erupted, culminating in a powerful punch that shattered a table before him. Yulion, however, seemed unusually excited by Vincent's display of rage. He couldn't contain his fascination with the tale of the one-armed swordsman, but Vincent, still seething with anger, demanded that Yulion cease discussing the matter. Yulion was perplexed by Vincent's anger and questioned the source of his frustration. Vincent retorted that the entire historical account had been fabricated. In a surprising turn, Yulion asked Vincent if he was someone from that era, to which Vincent responded affirmatively. Yulion, with a touch of jest, teased Vincent about his age, suggesting he must be quite old. Rushing aside the jest, Vincent urged Yulion to continue with the story. Yulion resumed his narrative, recounting how the hero King Kajin had set aside his sorrow and partnered with the greatest hero and his dearest friend, the Sun Sword Emperor, to confront and defeat the archdaemon Daven. This revelation left Vincent inquisitive about the identity of the Sun Sword Emperor, a title he had never encountered. Yulion revealed the emperor's name to be Arslan, who was also the ancestor of the Adenka family. Suddenly, Vincent recognized the name Arslan and began to piece together a connection. He recalled Arslan as someone who had deeply admired Daven and aspired to follow in his footsteps. Daven had taken Arslan under his wing, serving as both a mentor and a surrogate brother. Arslan had even visited Daven in prison on numerous occasions, determined to uncover the truth and vindicate Daven's honor. However, Arslan's visits had abruptly ceased, leaving Vincent perplexed. Yulion revealed that Arslan had ultimately become the first patriarch of the Adenka family and had passed down to them a sacred mission closely tied to his own aspirations. Vincent pressed Yulion for details on this mission, which Yulion revealed was to surpass the Samion family and unearth the truth. Vincent contemplated Arslan's steadfast resolve to clear Daven's name and his decision to forsake the Faulkner family in favor of founding the Adenka family, a lineage devoted to the pursuit of truth. Vincent felt that his rebirth into the Adenka family was nothing short of destiny. Vincent's curiosity led him to question Yulion about the prospect of fulfilling his family's life mission and achieving his calling, which would enable him to ascend to the rank of a true god. Yulion confirmed the possibility, hinting at the potential for Vincent to receive an extraordinary blessing upon achieving godhood. Filled with newfound determination, Vincent grasped a sword and offered his gratitude to Arslan, pledging to carry on the mission Arslan had left behind. Together, they stepped outside, where Yulion playfully referred to Vincent as an old man. Vincent, growing increasingly frustrated, insisted that Yulion cease using that term. Yulion humorously shifted to addressing him as brother, a title Vincent accepted with more ease. As they observed soldiers sparring in the distance, Vincent couldn't help but wonder how much stronger the descendants of Cajun had become over the centuries. Yet an unexpected heaviness overcame his body, and he collapsed, losing consciousness. Following his collapse, Vincent retreated to his room to conserve his depleted mana. It was during this period of recovery that Vincent had a sudden realization, prompting him to urgently call for Yulion, who arrived in his pajamas. Vincent questioned why Yulion had never learned the art of swordsmanship. Considering his unique condition with the heavenly exoskeleton, Yulion appeared puzzled by Vincent's inquiry. Vincent explained that his body possessed the extraordinary ability to store mana throughout its entirety, particularly within his bones. This unique attribute granted him transcendent strength that exceeded that of an ordinary human. Typically, miracles fueled by mana were derived from the heart, but Vincent's heavenly exoskeleton allowed him to store mana in his bones as well, ensuring an inexhaustible supply. Yulion was astounded by this revelation, particularly given that Cajun, whom they referred to as the Hero King, also possessed the heavenly exoskeleton. Vincent's life took an unexpected turn when he found himself reincarnated with a heavenly exoskeleton, mirroring the very trait that had ignited his envy for Cajun throughout his entire previous life. As he navigated this new world, which had evolved dramatically over the 500 years he'd been absent, Vincent couldn't help but reflect on the strange twists of fate. Yulion, a companion in this unfamiliar world, took it upon himself to enlighten Vincent about the peculiarities of their era. He explained that Vincent couldn't link imagery to his heart, a concept that left Vincent perplexed, for he was entirely unaware of such terminology. Yulion, in his attempt to clarify, introduced Vincent to the notion of imagery as an imaginary storage for mana. This revelation led Vincent to a troubling realization. He couldn't store mana in his heart. With curiosity piqued, he turned to Yulion to inquire about the meditation method, only to find Yulion equally ignorant of this ancient practice. Vincent took it upon himself to shed light on Arslan, the first Adenka, and the extraordinary meditation method that once bolstered mana within the heart. In contrast, Yulion unveiled the current era's method, which involves storing mana through imagery, each one representing a star. The number of stars harnessed was indicative of a martial artist's strength. Vincent struggled to come to terms with this modern approach, realizing that in their world, an adult in the family had to create at least one imagery, and the act of linking an imagery for the first time, while sensing mana, marked the requirements for achieving a single star. This revelation left Vincent contemplating the purpose behind this shift in mana manipulation techniques. It became evident that the imagery system was devised to mitigate the perils associated with storing mana directly in the heart, a practice that had claimed the lives of countless martial artists in the past. The risk of mana bursting into the heart made it a dangerous proposition, but Vincent believed his strong heart was up to the challenge and continued to channel mana into it. Yulion, however, questioned Vincent's decision, emphasizing the importance of adhering to a circuit formula for efficient mana flow. Vincent was astonished by this revelation and inquired about the existence of such a formula. Yulion confirmed its existence, explaining that the formula served to enhance the effectiveness of mana utilization. Vincent recounted a time when nano usage had been more liberal, a time when nearly half the population had suffered from twisted and burst magic power circuits. Yulion was left in shock by this revelation, urging Vincent to be gentler with his body. This led Vincent to question why Yulion had subjected himself to such a change in mana manipulation techniques. Vincent's body had been born with a heavenly exoskeleton and possessed a strong heart and magic power circuit. Had he received proper training from a young age, his potential for greatness would have been immense. The heavenly exoskeleton, a bone structure designed for mana storage, had languished without mana for over 13 years, threatening Vincent's very existence. He had turned to meditation to slow the deterioration, but he was aware that there were limits to its effectiveness. Vincent estimated that he had roughly 10 years left, a seemingly ample period. It was enough time for Storm Sword to ascend to the position of Sword Emperor and for one-armed Daven to fade into obscurity, much like the 10 years Daven had spent in starvation during his underground imprisonment. Those 10 years had been terrifying and unbearably long. As Vincent contemplated the years ahead, an unexpected interruption shattered his solitude. A furious knock on the door heralded the arrival of an angry visitor, who addressed Vincent as young master, and demanded an explanation for the disarray in the room. Vincent, taken aback, questioned the visitor's identity and whether he was, in fact, his servant. The visitor introduced himself as Wilson, and Julion's desire for his swift demise was palpable. Vincent responded by calmly removing his clothes and requesting fresh attire from Wilson. Observing Vincent's enhanced physique, Wilson wondered if this was the same Vincent he had known. He speculated whether Vincent had conducted experiments in the room, leading to the mess. Vincent, amused by the absurd accusation, vehemently denied any such experiments. Wilson's frustration mounted as he accused Vincent of madness resulting from isolation and excessive reading. Wilson's suspicions escalated, believing that Vincent had delved into dark magic, and he threatened to report this to the Grand Chamberlain and the Patriarch. In response, Vincent burst into laughter, finding amusement in Wilson's formal yet impertinent tone. He marveled at Wilson's persistence in pushing a narrative contrary to Vincent's own assertions. Vincent urged Wilson to fulfill the tasks assigned to him, reminding him that it was his duty. Wilson, still angered, expressed his reluctance to perform tasks he had no inclination for. He questioned whether Vincent expected him to clean up after him. Vincent, with a sinister expression, asserted that it was precisely because Wilson was his servant. Vincent offered to perform the cleaning himself if Wilson refused. Wilson, caught off guard, inquired about Vincent's destination. Vincent, in a nonchalant tone, declared his intention to seek out the Grand Chamberlain and inform him of Wilson's unwillingness to work. Irritated, Wilson reluctantly accepted the responsibility for the cleaning task and departed. As Vincent and Yulion contemplated the situation, they couldn't help but suspect that someone had orchestrated this interruption deliberately. Yulion shared Vincent's suspicion, and Vincent deduced that they likely intended for him to resolve the issue with his defiant and insolent servant. This ordeal presented an opportunity for Vincent to demonstrate the conduct expected of Adenka's seventh lord. Yulion took the opportunity to share an intriguing piece of information about Wilson. He had once been a member of a ruthless gang responsible for numerous deaths. Vincent's laughter resounded through the room as he considered the absurdity of Wilson's past and his current demeanor. Vincent pondered the energy that emanated from individuals with a history of taking lives. He noted a distinct lack of such energy in Wilson, leading him to conclude that Wilson was fabricating his sinister past. Vincent found Wilson's innocent eyes and overall demeanor to be inconsistent with the persona of a ruthless killer. Yulion, delighted by Vincent's astute observations, inquired about his knowledge of such matters. Vincent, wearing a sinister grin, simply stated that he had lived a life that acquainted him with the darker aspects of existence. Yulion's fear grew as he contemplated the possibility that Vincent had summoned something far more ominous than a mere spirit king. Vincent's life in his new existence was marked by a series of intriguing encounters. One such encounter involved Wilson, who returned with the freshly laundered clothes Vincent had given him earlier. Wilson inquired about Vincent's satisfaction with the room he had cleaned, and Vincent graciously thanked him for his effort. Wilson took the opportunity to caution Vincent against turning his room into a battlefield in the future. Vincent assured him that he would make an effort to keep the room tidy. Unbeknownst to Wilson, Vincent couldn't help but notice the shift in his attitude. It appeared that Vincent's newfound confidence puzzled Wilson, who had previously considered Vincent to be utterly useless. Vincent decided to put Wilson to a test, instructing him to retrieve a 1-meter wooden sword weighing approximately 500 grams made of black-scented wood. Vincent noted that there were plenty of such swords in the family storeroom. However, he added a twist. If Wilson refused, Vincent would personally go and retrieve it, making sure to mention to the gatekeeper that Wilson had refused the task. Vincent knew that these gatekeepers were highly skilled martial artists, fiercely loyal to the family's direct descendants. Faced with this proposition, Wilson grew apprehensive and tried to dissuade Vincent. He even placed his hand on Vincent's shoulder in an attempt to stop him, but Vincent swiftly removed it and pushed him to the floor. He quickly apologized, revealing that he harbored unsettling memories of attacks from behind. Wilson, taken aback by this revelation, was hearing of it for the first time. Vincent sternly advised Wilson to keep this in mind moving forward. Vincent's body screamed with pain even from this brief exertion. Wilson, now irritated, berated Vincent, who responded with a sinister inquiry. Did Wilson have anything else to say? Frightened, Wilson stammered a negative response. Vincent continued by instructing Wilson to bring the requested wooden sword. Wilson, in a flustered state, attempted to placate Vincent, stating that he hadn't initially refused the task. With a sarcastic laugh, Vincent pointed out that Wilson had indeed expressed reluctance. Wilson, growing increasingly agitated, eventually left the room to fulfill Vincent's request. Upon returning with the wooden sword, Wilson attempted to regain his composure. However, he remained embarrassed by the earlier exchange. As Vincent examined the sword, he took the opportunity to share a personal story. He spoke of a person he had known, someone with no right arm whose life had been fraught with hardship, ultimately leading to a tragic end. Wilson, absorbing this revelation, suddenly bowed to Vincent and addressed him as young master. Clearly embarrassed, Wilson handed over the sword. Vincent's demeanor had left a profound impact on him. He promptly exited the room, his emotions in turmoil. Vincent couldn't help but reflect on the need for proper training. He ventured outside to engage in sword practice, but was shocked to discover how quickly exhaustion overcame him. His heavenly exoskeleton, it seemed, was weaker than he had anticipated. Still, Vincent found solace in the sensation of martial training and realized that he was born to be a martial artist. While engrossed in his training, Vincent's focus was shattered when someone unexpectedly cut the target he was practicing on. The intruder noted that he hadn't realized there was anyone else around, citing the weak presence of mana as the reason. Vincent inquired about the intruder's identity, to which he introduced himself as Raven. Yulion, who had accompanied Vincent, provided insight into Regan's background. Regan was a collateral descendant and a candidate predicted to win the upcoming Assembly of True Swords, a competition gathering martial family children connected to the Adenka family. Yulion warned Vincent to exercise caution around Regan, as he was considered one of the most skilled among the 13-year-olds. The Assembly of True Swords was a competition that allowed participants to engage in real sword fights, with no age restrictions. The winner earned the privilege of facing the Adenka family's direct descendant of similar age, Vincent, who was often deemed the weakest among them. Regan, in a mocking tone, questioned whether Vincent was too afraid to face him, implying that the assembly bouts would not be limited to wooden swords. Vincent swiftly retorted that a true martial artist should never fear swords. Regan laughed and acknowledged Vincent's boldness, though he criticized Vincent's manners, implying that Vincent's father had failed to instill proper etiquette. Vincent, unyielding, told Regan that he too needed to improve his communication skills. With a challenging glint in his eye, Regan withdrew his sword, declaring his intention to teach Vincent a lesson. Yulion intervened, warning Vincent that Regan possessed a 2-star level of skill and had the attribute of a steel man, making him significantly stronger. Vincent understood that he would likely lose if they engaged in combat at that moment. He recognized Regan's inferiority complex stemming from his collateral descendant status. Regan resorted to using his mana against Vincent, despite knowing that Vincent couldn't control mana, and that his father's neglect had left him devoid of proper martial etiquette. Vincent concluded that the martial artist of his time had regressed mentally, exhibiting a mindset akin to that of individuals 500 years in the past. He realized that he needed to address this issue and teach them the manners and etiquette of martial artists. In a bold move, Vincent pointed his sword at Regan. The gesture left Regan surprised and confused. Vincent conveyed that they should end their confrontation for the day, questioning whether Regan's fear of a wooden sword would carry over to the Assembly of True Swords. With a sinister expression, Vincent implied that the assembly bouts would involve more than just wooden swords. Regan, infuriated by Vincent's taunts, charged toward him with the intention of teaching him a lesson. regardless of their current location. Upon the confrontation with Reborn and the impending clash, Yulion advised Vincent to dodge Regan's attack. However, Vincent, with confidence stemming from the fact that Reborn couldn't wound him, brushed aside Julion's concern. Just as the tension escalated, Reborn's guard intervened, putting a halt to the brewing fight. Yulion breathed a sigh of relief. The guard informed Reborn that engaging in a fight with Vincent at that moment was unwise, as injuring Vincent would provide an excuse to avoid their encounter and the assembly of true swords. Reborn, though angered by this decision, reluctantly agreed, vowing to settle their score at the upcoming event. After the encounter, Vincent and Yulion retreated to their room. Yulion couldn't help but question Vincent's taunting of Reborn earlier. Vincent simply explained that he wanted to impart a lesson to a disrespectful individual. However, his attention was drawn to a portrait in the room. Yulion grew frustrated, urging Vincent to focus on more important matters. He had just finished explaining the concept of image theory, and now they were moving on to blessings and traits. Vincent, though intrigued by these subjects, couldn't help but feel uneasy about the idea of creating artificial blessings, which he considered disrespectful to the gods. Yulion dismissed his concerns, citing the lack of divine punishment for such actions. Vincent then inquired about Reborn's trait, Steel Man. Yulion described it as a medium-level trait, specializing in enhancing the body's defense and destructive power. As martial artists honed their traits, they unlocked stronger paths within them, leading to enhanced abilities. Steel Man was particularly focused on defense and destructive capabilities. Vincent couldn't help but feel that the martial education of this era was skewed toward these powerful traits. He marveled at how Reborn had effortlessly sliced through a scarecrow with a wooden sword, a feat unimaginable for someone of his age in Vincent's time. It became clear that traits played a significant role in martial prowess, and Vincent recognized the need to familiarize himself with these skills to compete with others. The next day, Vincent resumed his training, but it wasn't long before the guards began mocking him. They laughed as Vincent panted from just a few swings of his sword. However, their amusement was cut short when Vice Captain Merlin arrived. Merlin, the Vice Captain of the White Sword Unit, put an end to the mockery. He scolded the guards for their behavior and handed Vincent an advanced recovery potion, suggesting it would aid his training. Vincent learned that even though Merlin had initially laughed at him, the Vice Captain's eyes held a deep longing, indicating that he too was searching for something. Vincent promised to remember Merlin's name. As Merlin departed, he couldn't help but notice a change in Vincent, a spark of determination that had not been present before. In the days that followed, Vincent continued his training while also delving into the new era techniques. Over time, he began to sense mana in his heart and even started to visualize it. He was on the path to mastering the sword technique that had allowed one-armed Daven to challenge Kajin. Later, Wilson, frustrated by Vincent's frequent meals, attempted to play a prank by presenting half-eaten food. Vincent, aware of the ruse, scolded Wilson, warning him not to cross the line. Wilson prepared to fight, but Vincent's display of mana power left him shocked and quickly retreating from the room. Lastly, on the training grounds, Merlin couldn't help but notice the immense growth Vincent had experienced in just a few days. The wooden sword had cleanly cut a target in half, a feat that left Merlin astounded. He couldn't fathom what kind of martial art Vincent was practicing. Vincent's journey was only just beginning, but he was already making waves in this world of martial prowess. The next day, Vincent adorned himself in his noble attire. Yulion couldn't help but notice the dramatic change in Wilson's demeanor. He inquired about what had prompted such a transformation in Vincent's servant. Vincent nonchalantly replied that people like Wilson often knew how to take the initiative but struggled to retract their actions or words when necessary. However, Vincent's attention was soon drawn to the fabric of his clothes. He questioned Wilson about whether his attire was made of levadine cotton. Wilson admitted his ignorance about the material, prompting Vincent to explain its cost-effectiveness, but also its detrimental impact on soil quality, rendering it unsuitable for noble garments. Vincent also noted the poor quality of the food, which didn't align with the family's budget. He deduced that someone within the family might be embezzling funds. Wilson, though, professed to be unaware of such matters. Vincent suspected that the embezzlement might involve individuals from higher ranks within the family, casting a shadow of doubt and mistrust. In the training grounds, Reborn continued to hone his skills while nursing the sting of Vincent's taunts. Vincent's words had ignited a fiery determination in Reborn's heart, one fueled by a desire for vengeance. He couldn't allow Vincent's mockery to go unanswered.